Hello, David here. Thank you for watching. I am going to talk about the Stihl MS-251 and my experience with purchasing it and the knowledge and information that I gathered when I talked to Bill Miller, the owner of Miller Built Small Engine in Lynchburg, Virginia. Very nice man. The Triumph dealership used to be there. The place is decorated with RC, large-scale RC aircraft. He's a small engine repair shop, and he also, like I said, owned the Triumph dealership and worked on Triumphs a lot and helped me with my motorcycle when I needed help. Known him for a while as a customer. So I go into the shop, and I've already done my homework. I've decided not to get a Husqvarna, and I've had like 3 pull-ins, you know, that you buy from Home Depot and whatnot. And so I decided to go ahead and invest a little more money in a chainsaw that hopefully is my last chainsaw as a homeowner. Have about 2 acres. Tree falls every once in a while. I need 18 inches of bar. So anyway, he came out and he talked to me, and I told him I'd done my homework and I already decided what I wanted, but he still went through the whole process, kind of like to double check, make sure that was in fact the right one for me. And so we talked about chainsaws, and he said that this was a good choice for what I wanted to do. So the MS-251 is just the standard base model. They have some other ones that are basically sort of like fuel injected and a couple other features. They're all pretty emission controlled nowadays. When I told him I didn't want a Husqvarna and I had owned Poolins, he informed me that, hey, you know, those are pretty much the same machines anyway. So I was glad with my decision to go there and purchase this Stihl. So I go in there and he makes sure that this is what I needed, and we went over the smaller ones and the larger ones and reviewed it, and he got someone on his staff to write it up, and he went into the back to assemble this one and get it ready for me. So after I paid for it, which it came to $329.95, $17.49 in tax, for a total out of pocket of $347.44. So it came with your standard tool, which is a spark plug wrench and your chain tensioner wrench, your flat screwdriver for tensioning it, your flat screwdriver for your idle adjustment, your Torx to remove the cover, owner's manual, and a bottle of oil, which I will talk about in a minute. So this is a USA product. That's really nice. Always a plus for me. It was manufactured and assembled in Virginia Beach, Virginia. The Lexan covers and pieces were molded in Lynchburg, Virginia, which I live very, very close to Lynchburg, Virginia. So this is definitely a Virginia product. I was very happy about that also, a little bonus there. Also, this is 2018, so this is the 5th year this has come out. It had a little growing pains when it first started out. The carburetor's sophisticated. However, the carburetor is very interesting. They deliberately designed it to be low cost, so in other words, it's specifically designed for the homeowner to be able to change it out at a low cost, 35 bucks for a new carburetor. So instead of taking it apart, overhauling it, it's inexpensive enough where a few years later, if it ever gets clogged up, and I'll go over that, you can just swap it right out. So after I made my purchase, I was told to go into the back, in the shop back there, and I talked to one of the mechanics because Bill was busy and I didn't want to bother him. So when he had a pause, I went over to the bench. He was finishing up with putting some gas in it and some oil, and he was ready to talk to me about just owning it, starting it up, how things worked, which of course, you know, I geek out on that stuff, so I thoroughly nerded out on everything he told me, and I learned a few things, and that's really what I want to talk to you about, is what I learned. So if you haven't owned a chainsaw before and you're looking at videos to see which chainsaw to purchase, I actually recommend going to Stihl's website, and they'll guide you through it. You know, you can go to Husqvarna's website if you're so inclined. They do the same thing. They kind of steer you towards the chainsaws that you need based on what you're going to be doing. So we'll start at the front. So this is the Wood Boss. It's 18-inch. If you need 20 or more, then you really need to go up higher in size. So what we have is we have a very aggressive cut. Now what that means is it'll kick on you. So that's, you know, dangerous. So the guard is made differently from the Poulins that I've owned, in that it's kind of like your seatbelt in your car. It's inertia driven, so it's virtually instantaneous. If it kicks on you, it's going to stop immediately. So I think that is really cool. So you have your lock feature, you know, and your run feature, so that is really nice. Next, he explained to me that like Poulin, Husqvarna, and some other brands, what they do is they just stick a catalytic converter on the front of these. I should mention that the state of Virginia is actually more restrictive than the state of California as far as two-cycle engines go. I know when I sold some of my used equipment, I could not ship it to California because of those restrictions, so I had to be careful. Even, you know, putting something on eBay or whatnot, it was actually against the law to sell it in California, so, or send it to California. So anyway, he was saying that after about 50 hours, those catalytic converters need to be changed. They just wear out, and that's the end of them. And you know, that's like, and then it starts running like crap. So that's like 50 bucks. So it's like $1 an hour for the catalytic converter, where these handle the exhaust completely differently. So now they do make others that are more, that are cleaner burning. And they're designated with different lettering and whatnot. Also, this is not the easy start, but I'll get into the starting a little bit later. Now, getting into what I learned that really impressed me was I asked about fuel. I said, hey, how about I just use regular gasoline with no ethanol in it? He said, no, you really shouldn't do that. He said, what you want to do is, because Virginia is so restrictive, you just want to use high octane. You know, the ethanol content, the 10% or whatever it is. He said that's perfectly fine for these carburetors. They won't mess up on you. You don't need stable. Stable is in the oil. This oil, he said, is just very inexpensive, and compatible to all the others. So it has stabilizer in it. And if you use the Stihl oil, or if it says stabilizer, he said that's fine. Doesn't have to be this particular brand. But make sure that it has stabilizer in it, and then use high test. I think he said 91 or higher. And the reason for that is in Virginia, because of the emissions, which is funny because we don't have emissions testing where I live. They do in up near DC, but not where I live. They add chemicals which are harmful and will eventually eat up the carburetor. You know, it's like benzenes and different chemicals that he named, and I'm sorry I didn't remember it for you. But anyway, he just said use high test gasoline and you'll be fine. So to fill the fuel tank is pretty cool. It's a half-turn, vent-free cap. He said it took a while for them to perfect it. It's just a half-turn. He said it will not leak. It will not smell. It's vented through the engine. So you could leave this in your car, basement, crawl space, and you will not smell gasoline. Bar chain oil. He said just use a good quality oil. It doesn't have to be Stihl. He said just, make sure it says bar and chain oil. And then he explained to me technically why it won't leak. You will not see oil on the chain. It won't spray or leave a path like my Poolin did. Oh yeah, let me show you. So here's my last chainsaw that just crapped out on me. So anyway, and you can see all the oil that is leaked out. He said that will not happen. So don't be upset if you don't see oil, because I know with my Poolin, it like left just a line on the ground. If you held it on the ground, like let's say after you started it, and you revved it up, it would just leave a stream of oil right there where the chain was. Just absolutely amazing. So he said oil consumption is greatly reduced. He said you'll run about 3 tanks of fuel per 1 tank of oil. So he said don't be surprised to see your oil consumption drop really low, and that's for all Stihl products. So he said a lot of his professional people, lumberjacks and whatnot, the guys that run the big stuff, that really saves them money. So I told you about the fuel. Just use the high octane. You don't need stabilizer. It's in the oil, or make sure your oil has stabilizer. He said the starting procedure is always the same. Now, because this is a new machine, he could only do a couple of things at the shop. One of them was tension the chain, which I'll talk about in a second. And the other one was to just get it up and running. When it first starts off, brand new, factory new, you're gonna maybe see some sparks. It may run a little rough, and that's because of the carburetor. It's a very interesting carburetor. It's really cool. Very sophisticated. So I'll use the Torx he gave me just because it's right here and I don't have to get my electric driver out. So anyway, he pulled the cover off just like I'm doing here to show me what's going on. So you just put the brake on. That'll give you clearance. And if I've loosened everything up, it should come right off. All right. Air filter. He said this is more important now than any time in the past. He said especially on Stihl saws, and especially with all the emissions standards and everything that's going on. He said it is extremely important to keep the filter clean. Just twist right off. Said you can wash it with soap and water. Do not use any chemicals. Don't use carburetor cleaner. Don't use gasoline. Don't use nothing but soap and water to keep it clean, or change it regularly. He says it's extremely important. You'll lose power quite rapidly if you don't keep the filter clean. It's very important. Spark plug, he says you get 500 hours out of it. And I about hit the floor. I said, you're kidding. I said, I used to have to change spark plug every season. So now, get about 500 hours out of it. Well, that was a wow for me. So what I learned about the gasoline, use the high test, don't need fuel stabilizer. The life expectancy of the spark plug, I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal. So, like I said with the carburetor previously, it's extremely serviceable for the homeowner to get to it. If you're anywhere near mechanically inclined, this is very easy to remove and replace. Oh yeah, another really cool feature he showed me was this over here. Alright, let me get it on camera. Pull it out for you. See this little tab? Half is solid, half is open. That's summer and winter. So in the winter time, you want it opened so that the heat that the fan is generating over here on the side the heat that the fan is generating over the side, because it's drawing in air to cool off the engine, it'll allow it to go into the carburetor. He said because of the emissions and the way the carburetor self-adjusts, it takes about a minute to self-adjust based on temperature and humidity. If it's really cold, it'll run a little rough if you don't have this open for the heat to get to it. And of course in the summertime you don't need that. You can just put the solid end in there and run it closed and it'll take care of itself. He said above 60 degrees you should be fine. So this carburetor, like I said, is very sophisticated. It takes a little while to adjust. It'll hunt itself for a little bit. And then he said there is a real break-in period for this. He said 3 tanks of gas. He says after about the first tank of gas, it'll get up to about 70% power. Just cut small branches. Don't go for big trees or tree trunks just yet. Run a tank through it. That'll get you about 70%. He said after the second tank, it'll get you to about 90%. And he said pretty much after that, you'll be, at the power that the engine can produce to the chain for its, its individual self, however many, horses or kilowatts, however you want to look at it, per cc is going to be generated. So that's pretty cool. Also, upon reassembly, he stressed that, this is just a small piece of plastic. Don't break it, so put it all the way in the down position when you replace your cover. Made in Lynchburg, Virginia. And I'll tighten that down. So it's pretty cool. So before I go to the last thing, which is chain tension, he talked about starting. And as you know, you can put your foot on here and pull, or you can put it between your legs, and that's covered in the manual. So he prefers putting it between your legs as shown in the manual. And he said it is extremely important that you do not throw it down, which I'm guilty of with my pulling. And by throwing it down, what I mean is you take the cord and you throw the machine down as you're pulling the cord. He said those little ears that engage the flywheel, he said they're just plastic and they're actually designed to break. If you throw it down, it will break. That's just the way it is. Know your machine. Alright, now I actually kept the accessory grip off of the pulling, thinking that I could transfer it over, but Stihl it came with one, so I don't have to worry about it. Now, because this is a new machine, he stretched the chain for me. What he did is he loosened the nut about a half a turn, and then while it was running, he would throw the brake and stop the chain. And then, let go of the throttle so it'll go idle. He did that about 4 or 5 times. He said it is extremely important that you keep it tensioned up. He said that, he checked it right in here, and he said that's the tension you want, and you want to keep it there at all times. He said that is extremely important for these chainsaws. It's a one nut system. He says they don't come loose. It's very robust. So you just take your spark plug chain tensioner tool, loosen it up a little bit, turn it until you get this tension right here, and then lock it down. So, and again, no oil. You won't see oil shooting out all over the place. That's actually a new standard that came out. It's actually law now. So there you have a static review of my new chainsaw as given to me by Bill Miller of Miller Built in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was very nice to take the half hour, 45 minutes back in the shop while it was on the bench. Good to go over everything like I just went over with you. He talked about maintenance. You can just put it in your crawl space, no big deal. Put it in your shed, The summer-winter setting, you know, he filled it up with oil, he filled it up with fuel. So what more could you ask for? Also, when he was talking to me, he said a lot of this is, you know, my opinion. You can do what you want. It's your chainsaw. So anyway, he didn't want to give the impression that he was dictating to me or anything, but it was very sound advice. So I'm passing it along to you, especially about the fuel. I mean, that was a big one for me. I mean, I have been purchasing the gasoline from Marathon. It's like 90 octane, I believe, and it has no ethanol in it, and then adding Stihl. And I've been doing that, and so now that I have this knowledge with the high test, I'll just buy high test, the high octane for all of my equipment, and then the straight gas, I'll put the Stihl in, and for the my 2-cycle engines, I'm going to just use oil that has stabilizer in it. So I hope you liked my review. I hope that I gave a nice plug to Bill and Miller Built in Lynchburg, Virginia. If one person goes there because of this video, it'll make me happy, because I am just endorsing him. I've known him for many, many years, but only as a customer. I mean, you know, we're not pals, we're not buddies. He probably doesn't even know my name or who I am or anything. So, but anyway, I've always been impressed with his honesty. He's helped me a lot with my motorcycles. He was extremely personable, answered all my questions, went through everything on the chainsaw, made sure I understood everything about it, and it was just phenomenal. I was just tremendously impressed with that kind of customer service. Also, it was good to know this is a Virginia product, made in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and like I said, the molded pieces made here in Lynchburg, Virginia. So that's kind of cool, at least for me. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.